Thank you for being here. I'm going to start with Ana Cecília, Cissa. You've just published a study last month on the status of restoration in the Amazon. Can you please share with us what are the main findings of this report? Of course. Good afternoon, everyone. Well, the WRI study intended to map the actors that are present in this landscape. So we have identified 4 main axes for these actors. What is the role that they are performing, the front that they are acting on, technical assistance. This is a great bottleneck in the Amazon today. Less than 10% of the geographies have the necessary technical support, and this study proved to us that there is a very favorable scenario in the Amazon as a whole. We really delved into the matter. Para has been showing as well how more recently with the drafting of the national policy and also the Para state with its PRVN, which is the state's regulation, is able to change the landscape. This allocation of resources was really important for us to gain scale. Gabriel, one of the greatest moments of restoration was the creation of Mombak. Let me ask you. You do not come from an environmental neither a restoration background. Why did you decide to found Mombak? Thank you for your question, Fabiano. Well, our main focus is reforestation. We've been doing that in the Amazon, so we acquire degraded areas in the Amazon due to cattle raising, and we transformed said areas in biodiverse forests. In the last 4 years since we've started the company, we were able to develop 12 projects, so we have 12 farms, different areas of the Para state, and we have planted more than 12 million trees of more than 110 different species. And we've been able to access the market. We've been selling carbon credits to companies such as Microsoft and Google. So in the last 4 years, we proved that there is a demand for this new class, this new type of assets. This is just the beginning of a great journey. Now, why did I decide for this field? Opportunity. One, opportunity of contributing to the climate issue, and second, the market opportunity. The potential is $1 trillion in this market. And we see Brazil as the best place for us to start the biggest carbon emission company in the world. Cissa, Mombak's model is one of many in the Amazon, in Brazil, and in the world. Again, based on WRI's report, could you please detail to us what are the different types of restoration, because the terminology still escapes us. What are we talking about? Yes, we have a scope as a continuum, right? So depending on how we find the area, we will decide on a different approach. Mombak has also been focusing in cattle raising areas, right? So these are recovering areas. So the first stage is for us to nurture the soil, to support the forest, to reestablish itself, and then depending on what we find in the matrix, we will propose a different plan. Today, we have different studies from WRI, the national policies as well. We have been adopting the assisted natural regeneration plan. And so that is an ecological restoration. We move away from more simplified processes to add complex and diversity to them. Mombak said that they have been planting 110 different species, right? So if that were the dream, the ultimate goal, because it will bring more diversity to the forest, it will be more attractive to our fauna. And we've been talking a lot about the productive regeneration as well, one that generates income and food security, diversification to our different chains, especially in the Amazon, of forest species, and also some timber products as well. So how can the forest recover? And it doesn't have to be abandoned in the future. It is manageable in this period, allowing for biodiversity, pollination, water preservation. When we look at this landscape, this is a mosaic of different formations, right? Productive areas. There is an IPAN study in the Amazon showing that the soy area that has some forest nearby is saving 20% of water in their production. So all of that is relevant. And we also have the agroforestry, these simplified systems that allow for secondary vegetation and the recovery that we are aiming for. So these are the main models being adopted today in the Amazon. Great, thank you. Gabriel, Mombak, Green, Bioterra, all of them got lines of investment via Fundo Clima, the climate fund, at BNDES, the Brazilian Development Bank. Could you elaborate, give us any details on how was the process on ensuring that financing? Sure, the Brazilian government has acknowledged that we have a potential to be a leader in the carbon credit emission field. So just as the government have been supporting the soy industry and meat, eucalyptus, the government has also realized that there is an opportunity in the carbon credit emissions and is now developing programs to support that sector. Let us highlight a few of them. First one, as you mentioned, subsidized financing. The taxes that we can access today via BNDES, they are more attractive than any other in the world today. So that is helpful. Second, the government is providing concession land. That is the biggest opportunity for us to be able to access large lands that need restoration. Third, there is a signaling of demand, because investors, when they look at Mombak, they ask themselves if there is a market to buy our product. And the government has been launching auctions for the purchase of carbon emission credits, and these are big ones, like millions of tons for 20 years, and that is an important signaling that we need to develop the sector. And lastly, we now have Embrapa starting its surveys. That is a Brazilian Agricultural Research Corporation, and Embrapa. Everybody knows what happened to eucalyptus in the last decades, so we need to keep an eye in the future. Thank you. Now, what do you think are the main opportunities for reforestation in the Amazon? You talk a lot about the land titling. Yes, we face many challenges, right? So the first is to access the capital. The process of reforestating a pasture land that will then lead to carbon credits and the selling of such credits, that demands a lot of capital, and that capital must be invested before the revenue comes in. So there is a mismatch. We need a lot of capital. It is a risk capital because it predates the revenue. So the first big bottleneck is the availability of capital in large scale and the appetite of environments. So good news is that we have an increasing number of investors seeing these assets as a real one. We have just sold, as I've told you, to Microsoft and Google, right? So that is really helpful. And second difficulty is the access to land. Concessions help us a lot. There are plenty of land in the Amazon that, degraded land from cattle raising. But in spite of that, it is difficult. Sometimes we spend more than a year doing the full diligence till we get to the level that we need to make that move. Currently, we borrow many activities from the forestry world, from the eucalyptus world, and we adapt that to the native vegetation. So I would say it is a less critical challenge than the previous two. Okay, now maybe using the cliche of challenges and opportunities, Brazil has a goal, which is our national plan for the recovery of native vegetation, Plana VEG. And we already, in 2020, our goal was for 2030, for recovering 12 million hectares up to 2030. Do you think that is still feasible?
That also comes from the general policy for the climate. And we're going to have the official data announced next week, but we have about 40% underway for this restoration. What is necessary is that we have the private sector who wants to invest there too. And Mombak can tap into resources from BNDES and other cooperatives that are working at the Amazon. Next week, we'll be launching the Flora Fund that is spearheaded by WRI, but it's also a partnership with Cital. And we're able to capture resources to start the Rotary Fund. And this fund is going to be supporting organizations not only for restoration, but also for infrastructure to promote these businesses so that they can accumulate some maturity and can actually use resources from other sources. The land issue is very important when it comes to restoration. What is the legal security, the legal certainty that the proprietors have when they do it? And the ones that are funding it, what security do they have for investing in it? This 40%, I can't tell you how they're distributed in different biomes, but this information is going to be made public next week. Gabriel, going back to the Mombak business model, one of the carbon market analyses is that the voluntary market, and your customers are from the voluntary market, they wouldn't be able to deal with the scale of increase that the regulatory or the regulated market could do it. Do you think you need a regulated market for this target to be achieved? Absolutely, yes. We depend on the voluntary market at this point. And there's a lot more demand in the voluntary market when you look at the supply, looking at every carbon market in the world, but it's not enough when you think about what the planet needs. So we depend on regulated market. The Singaporean market, or pardon me, the Singapore government has an auction for over 200,000 tons to be, or 200 million tons to be bought every year. And there's the regulated market that is being built in Brazil. That's absolutely key. We still have 2 minutes. Well, Cecília knows a lot more about restoration than me. If you have a question you'd like to ask Gabriel about restoration, that'd be lovely. I do have a question. We have high expectations when you come to the private sector participation, and so that they would see this as an opportunity, a turnkey moment where you would see the Amazon not only as a direct exploitation market, as traditional exploitation has taken place, but with bioeconomy, maintaining cultures, people. How is it that you and Mombak have been dealing with this matter with the communities in the areas where you act? That is one of our main concerns when we get to a region. So before we buy or before we establish a partnership with a farm, we first of all go to the region to try and understand the situation as a whole, and then we talk to all of the members in that community, the neighbors, the leaders, to try and for them to understand who Mombak is, and so that they understand what the situation is, if there's any disagreement. Also understanding whether we're going to be welcome. We have always been welcome so far. And we develop social programs with this group. There are programs for them to access our farm, for them to continue to fish, for example. Also, for them to extract non-wood products from our farms. We're going to sell 1 ton of urucum with local cooperatives and 19 tons of cocoa. These are but 2 examples of species that we have that produce fruit that can be collected, that are not going to have a negative impact there. Thank you very much, Cecília and Gabriel. Thank you for your time.